It's time to explore the world according to Glenn. I'm Kevin Jacobsen. Glenn Close is my favorite actress, and this show is all about exploring the career of one of the finest actors of her generation. Each episode, I'll be joined by a guest as we dive into one of Glenn's movies, TV shows, or stage productions, going chronologically through her career, discussing her performance, and assessing the project itself. And today, we are talking Glenn's first leading role in a feature film, a dual role, in fact, in 1985's Maxie.
Eight-time nominee Glenn Close, motherfuckers.
My guest today, I had such a great time on And the Runner-Up Is, where we discussed the 1992 Best Actress race, Emma Thompson's big win for Howard's End. She shared with us the details of her scrapbook, which was fascinating. But yeah, she is an actor, screenwriter, host of the Murphy Brown podcast. Welcome to the show, Lauren Milberger.
Oh, I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to talk about this movie with you.
Wow. I love that.
I mean, figuratively, maybe not literally, but, considering how long I have had a warm place in my heart, in my childhood heart, for this film that I was telling you before we started recording, I don't think I've seen probably since the late 80s, but remembered so much of it. Although some things I forgot, which we will talk about, which is interesting.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yes. Much like our pal Maxie Malone.
Yes.
You've been waiting for so long to get this chance.
Yes.
Now
the irony was not lost on me watching this film.
Beautiful. All right. Well, before we talk Maxie, would just love to know your overall thoughts on Glenn Close and your relationship with her as an actress and where you first took notice of her, I assume in the 80s, like you mentioned, and if you have a favorite performance from her.
Yeah. It's interesting, looking back on my relationship with her work for this podcast, it really sort of dawned on me the collective consciousness of me with her that I hadn't remembered. Because one of the big reasons I watched this movie so much growing up was that my parents got HBO. And in the early to mid 80s, I meet a lot of kids around my kids. We're not kids anymore, but around my age who are like, oh yeah, if something was on HBO, I watched it all the time. I don't even know if I liked it. I just watched it all the time. And so looking back, I watched so many adult movies. I watched Reversal of Fortune. I watched Fatal Attraction. I watched Dangerous Liaisons. Maybe I didn't understand all of it. But looking back, for me, I think of Fatal Attraction. It's such an iconic role. Obviously, it doesn't stand up necessarily, but it is, I think, a bit of a zeitgeist of the time. So in that sense, as a period piece, right, of the time, it's interesting to watch. I have not seen it recently, but you see sort of the breadth of her talent, because as much as I can say, when I got your email, well, tell us your favorite, I was like, oh, well, Cruella de Vil. Right? Because it's so big and so amazing, and it's so hard to be big and funny and believable on film, right? And she does it. Mm-hmm. But that's what makes a great actress. That's why Meryl Streep is so good, because you look at sort of the bookends or the trajectory of the career, and it's they can do small, beautiful, dramatic work, but also this big, bold, comedic stuff, and it still works. And I hadn't thought of her career that way. In a sense, she's been a part of my life more than some of the actors like Emma Thompson that in my teenage years I became quite enamored with. And I now, just from this brief thought experiment, right, have such a newfound respect for her. Not that I didn't respect her before, of course not, but just to go, oh, I can't remember a time when she wasn't in my life. So it's hard for me to pick my favorite. But I would say not looking at sort of this is an important film and this is an important performance. I feel like I really became a huge fan of hers watching Damages. because I was older,
Yes.
right? I was an adult and I love
Right.
television. And it's a great example of what she does best, which I think we'll talk about in this film. Because I think this film is a bit refreshing to see her be vulnerable in a way that we don't usually see her, but it is a little different because I think her sweet spot is playing these villainous characters. And I'm going to say not making them three-dimensional. I mean, making them three-dimensional because obviously Cruella de Vil is a cartoon, but still, like, in Damages, you understood where she was coming from, even though she was a villain. And that is where she is great. But I also love her on The West Wing because it's my favorite show. And that episode, she's so calm. She brings such this like sereneness to that episode. And I mean, I'm a big fan of Deborah Kahn, who, you know, the woman who wrote that episode went on to write The Diplomat, created it. And so you see the seeds there, but also her performance in that episode is so important, even if it's very well written, because of the stance that she takes and the groundedness that she takes. And I think that that is why we're still obviously talking about her today. And I mean, just looking at her IMDb, you go, oh God, there's no roles for women over 70. No one is, look at all these women who aren't working. And you're like, Glenn Close is working.
She is booked and busy.
So booked and busy. So that's a long sort of, conversation, but I think I have to say Damages.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think a lot of what you're saying is speaking to other things we've talked about already on the show, which is that she always really knows the assignment, whatever she is doing. Like you said, being that calm, measured person in The West Wing versus slightly, intense, but also very complex and dark in Damages. I'm so excited to talk about Damages. We will absolutely be covering all 5 seasons, just to tease for the listeners.
I was very excited because I was realizing I don't remember much.
Yeah.
So I'll probably rewatch it with you guys, when you cover it.
Yes.
Because
oh my God.
I really would love to
Yes.
revisit it. And it just hasn't been something that I when I was a kid, I would rewatch constantly, obviously, as we'll talk about. But as an adult, as much as like I have certain things that I go to, to like, I sort of joke, I have my AFI speeches when I'm unhappy, all the comedic speeches that people give makes me, Nora Ephron, Elaine May, it just makes me happy. But I don't rewatch as much anymore. And I don't know if that's because there's just so much new content that I just can't fit in or something else. Because if someone is like, oh, let's watch The Apartment again, I'll be like, yes. But it's not something that I gravitate towards. I'd rather watch something new. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I totally sympathize with that. I will say that. I definitely rewatched a lot as a kid, and now I just feel like I'm kind of in permanent catch-up mode.
Yeah,
Like,
that
I just
too,
need to,
right? God, I have a
know.
list of movies I call the list I'm embarrassed I've never seen.
Yes,
And
which I will never share of my own for fear of blowback. But
sometimes
yes,
I'll
I
share it,
definitely
but
have
yeah.
that list as well.
Great.
Yes. So I think with that, we can get right into Maxie here. So this is a very exciting kind of pivot point, I would say, for Glenn's career. We're now entering a very fun new era for her. The days of playing the Earth Mothers are essentially over. Now she's getting more opportunities to stretch and show her range. And this, starting with this film we're talking about today, Maxie. So this is a fantasy comedy based on the novel Marion's Wall by Jack Finney. And the director, Paul Aaron, spent 6 years trying to develop this film adaptation. And because of the nature of the film, he needed an actress who was capable of convincingly playing the more down-to-earth contemporary woman type alongside this theatrical flapper girl from the 20s. There's not a whole lot of that I could find about her casting specifically, but I would assume part of the appeal of casting Glenn Close is that she is playing those down-to-earth types quite a bit on film so far, but she also has that theatrical background that is also like she has those two wolves inside of her, so it makes her very perfect for this role. And she talked many, many times in interviews in 1984 and around this time that she was very hungry for a leading role, and this felt like a fun left turn for her to really prove herself. So with that, to summarize real quick, Maxie is a fantasy comedy about this regular kind of yuppie couple. Jan, played by Glenn, works for the Archdiocese in San Francisco. Her husband, Nick, played by Mandy Patinkin, who also has a background in theater, by the way, works at the public library. So they move into this beautiful Victorian house, and they uncover a message left behind by a previous owner named Maxie. And they find out from their landlady, played by the great Ruth Gordon, that Maxie was a flapper in the 20s she used to be friends with when she tried to make it as an actress, but she only had this one small part in a short film and died in a car crash before she got her big break. So Nick ends up renting a videotape from the movie Maxie was in, and that night the ghost of Maxie appears in their house suddenly and talks to Nick, with Maxie, of course, being played by Glenn. So this is a dual role. And from there, Maxie starts to possess Jan's body throughout the subsequent days, or if not weeks and months, which embarrasses Nick at some points, but also kind of delights him at the same time. And Maxie becomes consumed by the idea of trying to carry out her unfinished business by trying out for a part in a movie. So it's kind of like a fish out of water comedy at times, with Maxie making her way through this contemporary world. Plus there's a kind of, messy, odd love triangle dynamic going on at the same time. So yeah, kind of a nutty premise, but Lauren, I know, like you said, you're very excited to talk about this movie with me, and I just am so curious about your relationship to this film and how it's maybe evolved from your childhood to now, and your thoughts on Glenn's dual performances here.
So I was one of those kids, born a theater kid. I don't have a memory of not wanting to be in show business. And so this is such a show business film. And it's interesting because, when I was 16, I became quite fascinated with Gracie Allen and George Burns. And then I eventually became an historian on them and wrote a play and several essays. And I had forgotten the vaudeville sort of underlining aspects of this film. I think it's implied that they had a vaudeville act. San Francisco is where Gracie Allen was from. It was a big, vaudeville town. I love how Ruth Gordon says theater. It's very specific. But also I realize it's kind of where I became fascinated with Ruth Gordon. And I've read several of her biographies. And she also was kind of like George Burns in the sense that she loved show business. It's like all she thought about. One of my favorite things about her is in the preface to one of her biographies. There's like three of them, I forget. But her husband, Garson Kanin, they wrote films together, including Adam's Rib, said that for fun, she would translate plays from French into English. For fun.
Yeah.
Like, she just loved it. And it's obviously like her last film. And I think that the sort of show business aspect of it as a little kid, there were also other movies like this. Like, I was also obsessed with a movie called I always forget if it's Kiss Me Goodbye or Kiss Him Goodbye. I should have looked it up. It's with James Caan. I recently rewatched it. It was not as good as I thought when I was a kid. But it's very much like a Bob Fosse character. And, in the 80s, there was so much Bob Fosse on television and like reruns of like Liza. And like I was very into jazz dancing and things like that. So I think that it was the show business aspect of it. Again, it's hard to remember when you were 7, but I do remember just watching this constantly, which is why watching it, I think there's sections of it that I know better, because for people who are not old enough for, switching channels on cable, you could just come into a movie halfway through, but because you'd already seen it, you would just sort of watch it. But watching it again, and I don't know if we want to go in order, with this, but if you talk about the opening, I did not remember that she also played Maxie the Ghost. And I feel that's such a wrong choice. I don't know if you agree, but it takes the believability out of it for me, because I know they try to mask her a little bit, but it's very obviously she sounds like Glenn Close. She looks like Glenn Close. And she doesn't look like the person in the movie, who I don't know if I read something
also true.
Is that, did I read somewhere that that's Carole Lombard or something?
Carole Lombard.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So obviously it's someone that we're familiar with. And I get that maybe they didn't want to refilm something, but I just feel such a missed opportunity for some believability if somebody else played the ghost of Maxie. Because it's not like she doesn't get the dual, like I understand she wants to play both roles. That's the whole point of probably wanting to do this film, was you get to play both characters. This mild-mannered woman who's freaking out and this like bold, fabulous flapper, which, is sort of her arc as well, as she learns to be more open and, although that kind of comes out of nowhere. But I just was like, oh man, I forgot. And it really surprised me. I don't know what that choice was about, but it should have been somebody else, personally. But I was pleasantly surprised that I still was able to enjoy it. But I don't know if that's because I still have this childhood feeling about it. Like even the music made me happy. I mean, I know it's like very 80s, right? Like and I watched Arthur and Tootsie. And so a lot of these films have a very similar score. But I really love the score, but I can't figure out if it's because it just reminds me of a happy time in my life when I was a kid and I had no worries, right? But I do think that the second and third act really sort of falls apart. And I kept thinking, did they cut a scene? Why are we not seeing this? Why are we being told this? Like all of the sort of anticipation of information that could have been chewed up. I mean, that's not the best word, but like devoured as interesting material to get to the scene when he tells her certain things. I felt were skipped. It was very strange. I don't know if you read anything that there was issues with the production, or it felt the second and a half of it felt like so rushed. And I didn't believe the love triangle at all, which made it seem like he was a creep. Although I feel bad, he was being sexually harassed. That felt very progressive to me. I mean, I know it was probably more play for the comedy of it, right? Oh, a man is being bothered by a woman. But in retrospect, if you look back at it, it could be that way. But I have a feeling that was them being like, isn't this funny? This woman is hitting on him, you know. But
right.
And I think also it's great to see Mandy Patinkin on screen because he didn't do a lot of film work.
Yeah, this was around the time of Yentl, so this was...
Yeah, I know he was fired from Heartburn, but I don't think that was because of his acting. I think that was a chemistry issue, but and other issues. I think he had some anger issues, but that's another story.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what were your first thoughts of the film?
Yeah.
Having not had a childhood connection to it.
Right. Yeah, I definitely saw this into my adulthood for the first time. So this was my second time watching. The first time I saw it, I will admit I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I just kind of felt like this is just an odd little curio in her filmography, but not really that great outside of her performance. And I still don't love it, but it did go up for me on the rewatch. What I do really like about it actually is that there's just kind of a earnest quality to it that I find really endearing. Like, it's not cynical at all. It's not mean-spirited in the way that a lot of comedies from the 80s can be. And I just appreciate that there's just like a nice sort of sincerity to it, as cheesy as that sounds, and in how Glenn is performing it with so much energy and gusto as Maxie. I mean, her performance as Jan, for me, is not super compelling sort of by design, but as Maxie, I know the voice may not be for everyone, and I sort of understand what you're saying, that a different person being cast there could have created an interesting dynamic, but I just like that she's having so much fun here, you know?
Oh, so much fun.
Yeah, like she's relishing this opportunity to finally let loose.
And I can imagine, you know, looking at the breadth of her, you know, filmography beforehand, that this would seem out of character for people, right? Like I could see how this was a way for her to show people sort of more of her range, you know?
Yep.
And I think a lot of, you know, actresses of her generation who start out sort of only doing drama, but also because we do that in America. I mean, not as much now, but absolutely back then, whereas the British would be like, oh, a comedy, a drama, a television show, a movie. That was always something that bugged me. I mean, again, I think that we're past that, but not completely. But definitely, people don't realize, like in the 80s, if you were a film actor, you didn't do television. And then Michael J. Fox kind of changed that a little bit, but then kind of not. But the idea that like you were going to be pigeonholed as this dramatic actor and then have her do this sort of, you know, fun character. But also what I was fascinated with watching it in retrospect, because of all my research on Burns and Allen, is what's really beautifully specific is that if you see particularly the scene when she's singing, right? When she's drinking, she's interacting with the people who would be Maxie's age, even the extras. They're the ones who are enamored with what she's doing. So what I'm getting at is that the voice, which may not be for people, that is authentic, at least authentic to the films of the time, right? Like that is a 1920s character voice, gangster mole. It's perfect. It's great. And And you love Maxie, even though Maxie is doing some terrible things. I mean, she's staying in this woman's body longer than she should, and she's having sex with her husband, and she's, redoing her hair. And, like, it's because of Glenn. Like, I think another actor who might be playing it. But you have to sort of remember that the person that she's playing is Ruth Gordon's age. So they're still alive, and they still have memories, and it's still in the zeitgeist, There's a lot of Gen X people know a lot more about the 20th century than I would say maybe some like younger millennials or Gen Z would, just because of the nature of the material that was put in front of us. Like you couldn't curate your own material. It was sort of what you were channel switching. And so you might find something from the 1920s or the 1950s or the 1970s. I mean, I grew up watching reruns of Laverne and Shirley and Three's Company, which makes no sense. At all. Or I Dream of Jeannie, right? Like, I'm watching things that, like, my parents watched when they were young, in college. Like, that's insane. So, for me, I see an authenticity to her performance that may not be for everybody, right? Because it's not in vogue. But I love her. I love that sort of gangster Molly kind of thing. And she's not doing, like, a Gracie Allen thing. She's doing just a very, like, sassy, like, I got this kind of thing. And I really love it. And maybe that's one of the things that kind of drew me to it as a kid, is like, Maxie's fun.
As people used to say, she has moxie.
Yes, Maxie has moxie.
There you go.
There you go. But also, there are certain things like, would there be a Charleston contest for a commercial audition? I don't know about that. But would there be someone like old enough who still remembered the Charleston who might want to have a Charleston class or an audition? Like, yeah, like that's what was happening, because these people are still alive. I mean, George Burns lived to be 100, but still, like, well, Ruth Gordon did pass away shortly after this, but that was something I wanted to ask you. I read that Ruth Gordon died after filming, right? She didn't die during, because she just disappears. Right. And I didn't remember that. I was like, oh, she's just gone.
Yeah, she died like a month before Maxie was released.
Okay, all right. So
she definitely completed.
That's
the
a
film.
choice.
Yes.
It's a weird. It's a strange choice, because I actually cried when I was surprised myself when I forget her. What's her character's name? Mrs. Lavin. That's right, because Linda Lavin.
Yes.
I was like, oh, Linda Lavin.
Oh yeah.
Mrs. Lavin realizes it's her friend.
Yeah.
Right before she
very
passes
moving.
out. It's very moving, and I wish that there was more of that. And maybe that's a male gaze thing, because that was something too. I was like, what's the point of view of this film? I guess it's about the couple.
Great question.
Which is, which is fine. But like, would it have been a more interesting film if it was about a guy whose wife turns into somebody else, which is a very, 80s thing, male point of
Very
view,
80s.
right? Like,
oh yeah.
He doesn't know what to do with his crazy wife. And then that might actually make the love triangle be a little bit more potent and be like not just limply lying there and believable. But at the end, I was like, I don't know what the point of view of this is. But like from a now perspective, it might have been interesting from her point of view. It's about a woman who has two people inside of her. And then you might have more of the relationship between her and Mrs. Lavin. It just felt like there were a lot of missed opportunities. I did like it better than, I don't know. When I rewatched the James Caan film I talked about, I really was disappointed in that. Like, I really was like, oh, this is bad. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah. Been there.
Yeah. But there's a whole thing about, there are many films that people who are younger than me will go, this is the best film. And I don't get it, because I wasn't a kid when I watched it. I mean, and I remember people older than me being like, Clue? Clue's a terrible movie. What are you talking about? I'm like, Clue is a classic. What are you talking about? And now everyone loves Clue, right? So, and I don't think Clue is a childhood thing. I think Clue is a brilliant film. So that's a whole other story. But I could talk about this forever, but I do think it's fascinating how sometimes you can't get rid of that feeling you felt when you watched it when you were younger, which is also the beauty of film.
Yes.
To be honest.
Yeah. Right.
So,
also, I feel like The Goonies was kind of that for a lot of people in my generation.
Oh, yeah.
Something that, like, if you watched it as a kid, you always have an attachment to it. But then I remember, like, watching it with friends, like, many, many years later into, like, adulthood, and half the people had never seen it before. And they're like, Okay.
Yeah,
Like,
but
what?
that's an example also because it's not an adult film, right? Like,
Yes.
Maxie is an adult film that I shouldn't have been watching. Not that it's inappropriate. I mean, I watched
Yeah.
Just One of the Guys, which is like major
Oh,
nudity.
okay. Yeah.
And tons of films that Jaws. I recently was talking to my mother, and she's like, "You never saw Jaws?" And I was like, "We used to play Jaws." Oh, I just thought you made up a game. I was like, "Why would we make up a game called Jaws if we hadn't seen the movie?" Oh, I was like, "We shouldn't have seen that movie. It was inappropriate when I was 5." But it was on HBO. And,
Right.
there's all these stories of, I'm a baby Gen X. I'm like right at the tip, right? So like I'm practically a millennial, to be honest. I always joke that I'm a minotaur, that like half of my body is Gen X and half of my body is millennial, because that's how I feel with my interests. Some people don't like that, but I like it. Maybe a mermaid is better. I'm a mermaid.
That's nice. I like that.
Thank you.
Also, because Mermaids came out in 1990, which feels like right on the cusp.
Love that film. Oh my God. Mermaids.
Yes, me
I
too.
hope that holds up. I haven't seen it in forever.
It does.
It
I
does?
watched it again
Oh,
recently.
good.
Yeah, and the soundtrack still hits.
Oh, well,
anyway.
yeah.
Just to speak again to the voice that she's using as Maxie, I just love the specific tone to it. Just like, even just the accent. Where's the projector? Like, it's just so funny. I don't know why. Like, it's
Because it's a
almost
funny
like
accent. It's used for comedy.
like I was gonna say like a higher pitched version of like what Natasha Lyonne is kind of doing with her voice sometimes.
Oh,
nowadays.
totally. Although Natasha sounds so much like Peter Falk at this point. Like,
Well, yeah, that's her idol. But I just like that it's such a bold risk for her, and I feel like it does pay off. And even if at the beginning you might be like, oh boy, is this going to be like the whole movie that she's doing this? I do think you get used to it pretty quick, even if it can veer into the cartoonishness at times. But that's kind of like her specialty, that she can play with those different tones and be that like over the top Cruella de Vil type in the Stepford Wives, and just playing with her voice a lot in that way.
yeah, like I guess what I'm getting at is like she did her research. Like, it's so obvious that she did her research and she's doing something very specific. And even Ruth Gordon. I mean, Ruth Gordon's from New England, and which you usually can hear in her voice, but she is kind of doing a bit of the same thing, I think. So they're matching each other, that you believe, that they sort of came from the same era.
I also read that Glenn modeled her voice off of Jean Arthur.
Oh,
which makes sense.
Okay.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I love Jean Arthur, so.
Yeah, again, this is like a believable, I think when I first started researching Gracie Allen, I thought, because if you read George Burns' biography, he's like, oh, well, her voice was actually not that high. It was a little bit lower. But when she was on stage, it just sort of naturally, went high. But it wasn't a huge difference. But then you like listen to her talking. She didn't do a lot of interviews, but actresses of her generation and her age, that was actually like an authentic way that women spoke. Even taking away sort of the gangster New York-y kind of, accent that she's doing living in San Francisco. But anyway, women did really talk like that, whether high or low, or, it wasn't just sort of, I think, something that was taken on for film at the time. Although, of course, everything is exaggerated, right? But it was, if you listen to radio in the 30s, God, like everybody talks like that.
Yeah.
So, I love it, but I'm a sucker for it. Like I always joke, like I collect like sort of nasal voices. I mean, she's not super nasal, but like that sort of genre, Singing in the Rain. That's one of my favorites.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I can't stand them.
Can't stand them. Yes.
But yeah, like you totally see why she took the role, right? Like she would be able to play these two
absolutely.
characters whose hair changes color so quickly. Oh my God. I don't understand. I mean, I've never dyed my hair. I've never bleached my hair. So maybe there's like a rinse. I don't think there's a rinse, right? Like, I just was like, you're a platinum blonde. And then you're not platinum blonde, but you have the same haircut. So that's fine. And then you're platinum blonde again. So it's a rinse. I don't think that's a thing. That's the things I think about as a woman. I just, and I think they have chemistry. Would you say that she and Mandy have chemistry? I think they're a lovely couple.
So. Yeah. I think they make a lot of sense together. Like I said, they have that theatrical background just as actors. They seem like they're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that
I think so.
they're not sort of a rich couple, right? They talk about that they don't have a lot of money.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
he decides to buy one lottery ticket
Even though
at
that
the
house
event.
is pretty beautiful, I will say.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I mean, it could be that Mrs. Lavin is like took pity on this nice couple, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Or it's a fixer-upper, right? Like maybe she
Yeah,
like decreased
yeah.
the rent if they like fixed everything up, because
Yeah.
it's implied, right, that she's owned that house since at least
I think so.
after close to when Maxie died, but they lived in the house together. So either she owned it or after Maxie died, she bought it. So that place has been there forever. Who's to say that maybe she never, did anything to it, particularly after her husband passed away? Doesn't she say, now I'm thinking, that her husband was really good at like fixing things or something? That might not be the exact line,
Possibly.
but there's something where she mentions about, or him always doing everything. I don't know. I could believe that, like, she's like, cheap rent as long as you renovate it.
Yeah, that's
I don't
true.
know.
No,
But
you're right. Yeah.
It is a film, right? So, disbelief.
Yeah. I think even that we kind of talked about this last week with The Natural, where even though, we're doing a analyzing of the movie, it does feel like a movie that doesn't necessarily benefit over analysis. Like you can just kind of watch it.
I mean, so
and
many films, particularly back then, don't, because what like the first VCR is the late 70s, and that's for rich people. It's really expensive. It's a Betamax. I don't think that. I mean, I remember from my kindergarten birthday party, we rented a VHS, like I think it was a Betamax actually, to watch Annie. Like we didn't even own one yet.
Wow.
And I don't remember. Most people didn't have a VHS in their home until 1985, right? Worldwide.
Yeah.
This is not obviously based. This is me guessing based on my experience. We don't have a rewatch culture, which is why, you can notice things like stunt doubles a lot more, right? Like there's a big part in Clue when they run into each other and it's like, that is so not them.
Yeah.
Because no one thought that
freeze framing.
Yeah, no one was going to freeze frame. No one was going to screen cap, So I think that, well, listen, I think that analysis these days to a point sometimes can be too much, right? Like
Yes.
It's a fun film. But that's what the fun of a podcast is to also just like
true.
talk about the stuff and make jokes and enjoy it, right? But this film has so many flaws. So, and most of it is in the writing. It's not in the music.
Actors
It's
innocent.
not in the actors.
Yes.
It's in the writing.
Costumes. Love the costumes.
Love the costumes.
Anne Roth.
Oh, I forgot. Can I tell you my story? I worked with Anne Roth, and I have a really cool story about her.
Amazing. Yeah.
When I first moved to New York, I did a lot of extra work because it's a great way to learn to be on set, right? Like, so I would do like one sitcom inside, one sitcom outside, 1 hour long. Like I did one of everything so I could learn the lingo, learn to be on set so that when I got my first speaking role, I could pretend like I knew what I was doing. It's a very good thing to do. But I had not done it for a while, but I was still obviously in their system. And I got a call to be a featured extra, which means that you'll be more on camera, which I always hated. I didn't want to be on camera, right? I just wanted to watch. I would look for the eye line of the camera and I would like take a little step to the side and like just read a book or something. Like I was only there to watch. But it was Julia and Julia. It was Nora Ephron. And I was like, do I say yes and get to watch Nora Ephron direct, or do I not do this out of principle, right? Like, I don't do extra work anymore. And I was like, and then they were like, we get to wear a period outfit and they'll cut your hair for free. And I was like, okay. Because I'd been wanting the guts to cut my hair short, to be honest. And I was like, I can pay for a haircut. I just meant like, sometimes when you're like, I'm afraid. I had huge hair. Like I had really long hair and I was afraid to cut it. Now my hair is super short and I love it. So that was the experiment. Anyway, so Anne Roth was doing the costumes and they were placing me to look like a very specific woman who was friends with Julia Child. And they had sent my measurements backwards to the costumes. And so the dress didn't fit me because they had my bust as my waist and my waist as my bust. And they were yelling at me. And I was like, I swear to God, like I would not confuse that. Someone else must have written down. So she came in and very nicely was like, we'll just have to find you another dress. So we met. It's totally fine. I was like trying not to be starstruck. It was rude. But then cut to being on set. This is the good part, the interesting part of the story. Everyone's like, this is boring, Lauren. No, this is where it gets interesting. So I get there. And because I don't care, I'm not telling anyone that I'm featured, that I'm supposed to be in a place, because I do not care. I just want to watch. I just want to learn. So they keep placing me in places that I know I'm not supposed to be. I just don't say anything. Not to mention, like, the way it was set up was not the picture. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to be no one. It's fine. Anne saw this because she took the time to pick my outfit. She was she was going to be sure that I was in the right place. So she comes up to me and goes, what are you doing here? And I was like, this is where they placed me. And she goes, no. And she takes me lightly by the arm and she brings me over into a booth where I'm supposed to be. Now, I notice that the camera is nowhere like near me. So I'm definitely off camera, totally happy. But that's where I'm supposed to be in the picture. And every time one of the PAs would try to move me, she'd go, no, she stays there. She stays there. And I was like, I love this woman. And not because like she's, helping me be on camera. I loved her because she was so like authoritative and forceful and like knew what she wanted and was like, no, I picked that I designed that. I picked that outfit. That is where she goes. And then eventually they realized that I wasn't on camera and they moved me at the table. So there's like a montage where Meryl Streep and Stanley Tucci, like she gets a book for her birthday and they sort of come down the table. I'm sitting at the table.
Wow.
And I got to, off mic, I could tell you about watching Nora direct, but it was really great. So it was worth it.
That's, well, you know what? Anne Roth is a legend for
a
reason.
legend. Yes.
So my Anne Roth stuff. Love her forever.
That. Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I like I said, her costumes here are pretty flawless. I would say all the little, especially like the red dress that Maxie
the red
slash
dress,
Jan
the dress
is
she
wearing
makes
at the
out of the
party.
curtains.
Yeah. Totally.
I mean, it's spot on just for the period, but also just like, yeah, she looks wonderful. My favorite one is the last outfit, right? When they're in the hotel and they go and they have that conversation on the tennis court.
Yeah.
That outfit is gorgeous. But also Maxie didn't make that outfit. I'm sure that she just bought it because now she's like, that was the thing too that I think was so great. Like, I don't know if it's believable that that would actually happen in the 80s, right? Like that depiction of Hollywood is very much a fantasy of Maxie, like, oh, we found this person out of nowhere and now they're going to be in a movie and we're going to have press following them around because she's the next it girl. Like maybe the 60s, maybe the early 70s. But like once we get, into kind of modern film, I don't know. Do you think like that's
I agree. It does feel very
fantasy.
Studio System
Very
more so
yes,
than
exactly,
the
yes.
80s. Like Yeah, I will agree.
As well as like when they were sneaking out, I was like, I think they can find you.
Yeah.
She disappeared and no one ever knew. I'm sure they can find you. But yeah, it's fine. She's now gonna pretend that she was never Maxie Malone. They'll never find her. She'll dye her hair.
Right. Even though there's this woman that's going around now, Jan, who looks exactly like her.
Yeah. I mean, listen, people change their names,
We
right?
found
Like
you.
that's fine. The other thing that made me laugh was not necessarily in a good way, but in a this is so 1980s, was the assistant priest who keeps looking at the women. He probably shouldn't be a priest. He should probably marry a nice woman and go after his urges. But like, I don't know why that had to be in a movie. I don't understand. I guess they thought it was funny.
Like, a remnant perhaps of the novel that didn't really translate.
Oh, speaking of,
so yeah,
I think I mentioned you, but I'm always joking online, like, why isn't Maxie a musical? It was apparently in 1993. It just was terrible. I don't know. I think this could be a great musical, right? Like, could you see like Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman, who did a lot of the Maryland stuff? Yeah, like I think they could really handle it.
I think actually this would benefit from being a musical because then you can suspend more of your disbelief with certain plot points, perhaps, and it's just like kind of okay because you're having a good time and it's sexy and fun and but to speak to that, I do want to just touch on that party scene, the scene where she's going with Nick to this fundraising party for Nick's work, which is, I think, a tour de force from Glenn personally.
Oh, it's the best scene in the movie.
It really is. Yeah. That's where it peaks, where Jan is like impulsively buying this sexy red dress and she, after the fact, doesn't really know why, but it turns out she's been inhabited by Maxie in a way. And so it's like she tries to cover herself up with a shawl as she's entering the party. But then when she orders the drink, it's like she suddenly is transformed, and she does make those transition moments play well, I find.
And that's where the dialogue, I think, actually is good, and is that
Yeah, I
the
think
the
so.
wordage, the phrasing, it doesn't feel like the slang that she uses. It doesn't feel like, oh, we're
Yes.
just throwing on slang that's not authentic. Like the way that she speaks is really authentic, and I love the detail of that scene. And that's why the bartender
Yeah.
is like, hey, like, I speak your language because we're the same age, but I don't know that.
Right.
Um,
Right. Calling a drink her hooch.
Her hooch, yeah. That was the other thing too. She didn't seem surprised that there was alcohol, but you know, it's fine.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you wouldn't think that, like, why is there alcohol here? Maybe she thinks she's in a speakeasy.
I think she's aware that she is in a different decade, I would hope. And I don't know.
I hope so. I mean, she is surprised by a lot of stuff, and that was the other thing too. I mean, Ruth Gordon really took a while to catch on. And she's like, that was here before you were born. I was like, do you not, like, how would she know all this? But anyway, I guess, why would you think that all of a sudden your neighbor is the inhabitants of your dead best friend? So there's also that. Like, I get
That's
it.
fair. Yeah.
But going back to the scene, you know, I think that now people are, because of Sunset Boulevard, people are more familiar that, you know, she has a singing background. But I feel like back then, even though it was closer to her having been in Barnum, and, you know, a lot of people would not be as familiar with her theater career. And I think that this might have been a surprise for people. You really just see why she took this part, because it shows off all of her talents.
Yeah, her singing Bye Bye Blackbird, just totally owning the room. I love it. Like I said, I feel like that is where the movie kind of peaks for me, but it's really such a good scene getting that other side of her. And it is kind of dumb that, like, Nick doesn't catch on to what's happening to her until after they leave the party. He just kind of is like, oh, it's Jan and she's just drunk. But like, she's clearly doing the voice of Maxie that he's heard the night before. She's acting very clearly like a 20s flapper.
Again, they look the same. Cast another actor. I mean, yes, but I also think being in that situation, are you going to go, oh no, my wife is now the ghost that I saw today? Like, you kind of want to go, I get why it takes them a while to sort of, because why would you ever come to that conclusion?
Yeah.
But when he does, he's still attracted to her. And I mean, I get that it's confusing, right? That's believable. But I don't know. I think because I didn't really believe that there was a real attraction, he felt like such a jerk. But that's another story. But I love that scene. The red dress.
Yes.
I do like the fact that it's sort of, she creeps in, right? Because she's like, I don't know why I bought the dress. Because she's Jan when she buys the dress, for sure. And that's something else I wish had sort of been explored. You know, that there's that beautiful monologue that Glenn does about, like, how she feels Maxie's feelings, even though she's not in control, right?
Yes,
and how
I totally agree.
Sad that is, how emotional. Like, that was very moving to me, and that she understands, like, in a way, even though she doesn't, how someone could have such a need like that. It's such a beautiful monologue, and, like, why isn't that in more of the film?
Yeah.
Like, that's something interesting, you know. But I guess they were just like, it's a fun comedy about a couple and he's having sex with his wife, but it's really somebody else. Ha ha ha. You know, men. But it just feels like there was such a potential for so much more in the film. That kind of makes me sad, because as much as I, you know, when I was a kid, I didn't get any of that, and how much I took to the story. And again, not Glenn's fault. It's a wonderful performance, and yeah, that scene is really kind of the best part of the film. Although I do like the Cleopatra audition. I do think that's really funny when she slides. You know, Glenn is good at comedy, and I feel like we don't really see her do that kind of comedy that much, where she's like so freaked out, and then she just sort of slides down the pillows. And also, people don't realize what's his name? Hamlin, Harry Hamlin. He was a big sex symbol back then. Like, that was like
good get.
Yeah, good get to play himself. So, you know, she could be, you know, enamored by him. But I do kind of enjoy that scene. Yeah, I feel bad. I actually do feel bad for Maxie. I mean, to die young and then, you know, get your opportunity and then that's it. But at least she knows she can do it. Right?
Yes. And to give the audience context for that scene we're talking about, it's towards the end where, you know, she is deciding she's done this commercial, which she didn't know was a commercial at the time, which I kind of find a little odd, but regardless, we're just kind of yada, yada, yada through that. And it gets to the point where she's discovered by these Hollywood producers just from the commercial, and they want her to screen test basically for the lead in Cleopatra. And yeah, it's kind of Jan is freaking out because she doesn't want to throw up on Harry Hamlin.
Because Maxie hasn't shown up. Like, that's also the conceit,
because Maxie
right?
has not shown up.
Yeah,
Yes,
which
right.
seems implausible. But I guess I believe Nick is like, she's mad at me and she's trying to make us squirm. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess.
Yeah. Right. And then when Maxie does show up, of course, she nails it.
Of course, yeah. She's a wonderful actress.
It did very briefly make me imagine what a Glenn Close Cleopatra would have been like.
Oh,
I will
say. I mean,
I'm like, okay.
As a a film historian yourself, I feel like, don't you think that this is them sort of also playing on the whole like Elizabeth Taylor, like big
Absolutely,
epic,
yes.
and that's fresh in people's minds.
Yeah.
Or I guess
satirical,
yeah. But I think also, I guess, a little bit on finding for Gone with the Wind, Scarlett O'Hara.
Vivian Leigh.
Why can't I think of
Right,
Scarlett
yeah.
O'Hara's name? I mean, obviously Vivian Leigh was quite known in the UK, but still like that huge search, right, that they did to find. But again, that's the 40s. It's not 30s. Excuse me. When I say 40s,
Yeah, late 30s.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's not the 80s, which is not a studio system. It is not about big, splashy, open calls necessarily, unless it's, But hey, it works. And I think, I think people should watch it if they like Glenn Close, to be honest. Like, it's a little gem. It's a little sort of slice of films at that time that sometimes get lost, I feel.
For sure. Yeah. Well, it's also not streaming anywhere for the record.
No. I mean, we found it.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
We found it. Yeah. We
But
did some searching.
Yeah. I'm sure because of the people who are in it, because Kiss, again, I'm probably going to say this, if it's Kiss Him Goodbye or Kiss Me Goodbye, I should just Google it. I had to buy it because I just really, really wanted to watch it. And it's funny because I hadn't thought about this film being sort of in that same genre of a ghost who's haunting somebody from show business. But it kind of is.
Well, I think I'll just add that towards the end where Nick is kind of making Maxie realize that she got what she wanted, that she proved that she was a great actress in the end, but that she can't continue on because, like, you're taking somebody's life away. Like, you've been inhabiting my life for God knows how long at this point. It's very vague, like the timing of how long this is taking place. But I think, Glenn gets a very moving monologue towards the end. It's kind of a standard thing of like, I'll always be a star type of monologue.
Yeah.
But she does perform it with a lot of grace and sincerity that I really found myself strangely touched by, especially knowing where Glenn would go in her career and become a movie star herself after this point. Plus, I will say it does feel like a bit of a precursor to what she would do with Norma Desmond on the stage. So
that's a fair point. I think, Maxie and Norma Desmond have definitely, DNA for sure in their wants and their needs and their feelings of being,
and the slight
forgotten.
desperation,
Well, yes, that for sure, the desperation and all, women of their time, I mean, it's a whole other conversation as well. But it's, I don't know, it's fun. There's a lot of stuff about 80s movies that I actually do miss.
Yeah.
And even though this is not the best film, there are aspects of it which, are delightful. And I think it's also great if you love someone's performances to kind of go back and watch the trajectory of their career, as you're doing obviously with Glenn. But again, like, I think what was also refreshing to me was when she's Jan, she has a vulnerability that you don't usually see in the roles that she plays, because she has such a strength to her in all of her performances. And that tends to be where people put her, right? Even today. And I think that also has to do with all the other roles that she has taken on, and the infamy of Fatal Attraction, I do have to say, and obviously Cruella de Vil and other roles and things like that. And I haven't seen Garp in a while, but like even in that, she has sort of a solid strength, right? Like this is a very different kind of wispy vulnerability. That's what I think I'm going for, that you don't usually see in the roles that she plays. I'm not saying that Glenn Close has a stealthy acting style. She does not. She is very emotional, but she has Well, here's a great example, I guess. Like when I was in grad school, our teachers would always say, you could be in a room with 20 actors who look exactly like you. They are not you. You bring a gravitas and a experience and a presence into a room that other people don't. And that's from your life experience as well. So you're never going to be competing against anybody except yourself. I always loved that. And so I think that's just a story to sort of talk about Glenn. She can be emotional and in the moment and break your heart. But the kind of roles that she usually plays are not Jan. They're maybe even not Maxie, but they're more towards Maxie. But they're going to be more towards someone who just has sort of a intimidating presence.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say
she can kind of do it all, I would say.
I agree.
I did also just want to, well, I'll just kind of sum up my thoughts by saying I do, even though I completely agree with so many of your criticisms of the film, I do still feel that there is just a very sweet spirit that just reads authentically to me in a way that I really enjoy. And to your point, do sometimes miss in today's comedies, especially, that I just still enjoy it even in spite of its faults, I would say.
Absolutely.
I think you kind of are agreeing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, and if it wasn't the fact that we're literally sitting down to pick it apart in a way, I would still just say generally, I enjoyed it. I'm so glad I rewatched it. I had such a warm feeling of it. It's really sweet. And because I think of the performances, you don't hate Maxie. And I think that if it was another actor, you might hate Maxie and therefore sort of shut off.
You might find her obnoxious.
Exactly. And not
think she's the villain.
Exactly. Particularly because they're really not, pushing a lot of the other emotional stuff, particularly with Nick and her. I didn't feel that they bonded. I felt that he just sort of kind of felt she was a manic pixie dream girl, it wasn't. Yeah. If they had a connection, that would have been interesting. But anyway, I hope that people I think could watch it and just find it kind of delightful. It's just delightful.
As some people would say, diverting entertainment.
Yes.
You're not going to necessarily think about it too much after the fact, but in the moment, it is enjoyable. Yeah. Unfortunately, critics were not kind to the movie.
Not surprising.
And we can get to the release of it. So it premiered at the Deauville Film Festival on September 8th, 1985, but then it had a bigger premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival a few days later. And then it was released in theaters in the U.S. on September 27th, where it debuted at number 6.
Oh.
Not great. But
that's better than I thought it would.
Well, still.
Okay.
I wrote this down here to kind of give a snapshot of 1985.
Oh, okay.
So it debuted behind Pee-wee's Big Adventure in its 8th week.
Oh, okay.
Teen Wolf in its 6th week.
Oh, no.
Back to the Future in its 13th week.
Oh.
Agnes of God in its 3rd week. And then the number 1 movie in America that weekend was Invasion USA, the Chuck Norris film.
Oh, okay. I was like, I've never seen that movie. I've never heard about that movie. I saw Back to the Future in theaters for sure.
Of course.
Of course I did. My parents dragged us. They went to see it and they loved it so much. My parents. I mean, I think because it was...
People went back again and again.
Yeah, they grew up in the 50s. So that was probably why.
So that's perfect.
Yeah, my mother was 12 in 1955. And my brother had a hissy fit. My little brother had a hissy fit. He didn't want to go. And I remember it to this day of him kicking and screaming. I mean, he was probably 5. So, Yeah. And then we were obsessed with it after that. It was our favorite movie.
Of course.
Yeah. See.
Yeah. So
anyway, sorry, I'm just talking about Back to the Future.
85. No, yeah, you have to. But there wasn't a lot of interest in Maxie, unfortunately.
Oh, well.
It only ended up making $2 million in total. I mean, do you have any thoughts on why you think it didn't really connect with audiences, perhaps?
Well, it's not a great film.
Okay, well, plenty of bad movies get good box office.
Okay, that's true. But I mean, I think that I find it fascinating that I, as a child, loved it, right? As a child, yes. I did not notice the flaws of this film. It's not a film for children. It's an adult film. I wonder two things. One, on the surface from my experience now, looking back. The fact that a lot of the emotional weight that I feel needed to be there, which we've already talked about, but like specifically, just to reiterate, when she goes into that movie theater and she sees the talkies, I did not see the connection at all. I was like, wait, what? Oh, now you want to stay in this body? That moment did not land with me at all. And I don't know if it was because it was too quick or the emotional beats weren't there. When he decides to tell her that they got this call about there's no sort of hemming and hawing, right? There's no sort of like, I'm making a decision, film is so much about being visual. It's not about the dialogue necessarily, even though I love dialogue, do not get me wrong. But like, there were no sort of moments of like, oh man, I really got to tell her this thing. And they skipped over all the sort of emotional beats. And that's why I felt like, did they cut stuff or that's just the way it was written? And so I can see it not maybe sort of engaging an audience. They may not realize why. I think most people, when they watch film, they're not doing like we do. Oh, well, the third act had some problems because there was no emotional art. No, they're just not getting something out of the film and they don't know what it is. I also think back then, and you tell me if I'm wrong, because you were reading from a historical background, whereas I'm just using my child experience, that people cared more about reviews back then. Would you say?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Great. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's always my experience was like, you read the review and if the review told you it was bad, you wouldn't go see it. Right. So I think that might be part of it too. I also wonder if seeing Glenn in a different way confused people. Also, I don't know how familiar people were with Mandy Patinkin at the time, if they weren't a big theater fan.
Yeah, and again, there had been Yentl, but...
Oh, it had come out yet. Okay, sorry. I wasn't sure if it come out yet. Never mind. People loved him in Yentl.
In 83.
But he's not a box office star, right? He's not a box office star yet.
No.
So, and that's like my grasping for ideas kind of a thing. But I think it might be the first two.
True.
Yeah, I think it might have been the reviews. People just paid too much attention.
Yeah, and I just think there is a tone to the film that does feel old-fashioned, I think, generally speaking. Fair.
Yeah.
And not really like the hip, cool movie you're going to see necessarily. Like I said, we have Back to the Future and Teen Wolf.
It's not Arthur, right? It's not, and I keep bringing up Tootsie, even though I know Tootsie is a little problematic, but as a film of the period, as rom-coms for the period, that is a seminal film.
Gold standard.
Exactly, yeah. And most of it most of it holds up. Those are the gold standard for 80s sort of, rom-coms. And not that this is necessarily a rom-com, but it's not as sexy and not that it needs to be explicit. Arthur is not explicit, but it feels more adult. Yeah. So yeah, that's true. I could sort of see it as being old-fashioned. This sort of reminds me, I used to have a podcast on Harrison Ford, much like you're doing. We went through all of his films, so not his whole career, but we went through all of his films. And something that I noticed watching The Frisco Kid was that felt old-fashioned for 1979 because of who was behind it, right? Like it was an older director who had done Westerns in like the 60s. And so watching that film and then watching Empire and being like, these were made at the same time, this is crazy. So that's a really good point. And I didn't look up the director too much, and I wonder what their experience was. I mean, the Patricia Resnick, who wrote it, went on to write 9 to 5. Well, already wrote 9 to 5. Sorry, my brain is not looking at the dates. Yeah. It's 85. We're in 85. Wonderful screenwriter, right? So that's why I was like, yeah, for sure. Are there cuts here that I'm missing? I mean, I'm going off on a tangent here, but like that's a really good point. It does feel kind of old-fashioned for the time, which may be why it resonated with a child.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I also think maybe there's a kind of like it's too silly maybe for the Tootsie adult audience.
Yeah, but not silly enough.
Not cool enough for the teens.
Yeah,
it's like there isn't that indelible hook, even though there is an obvious hook to the movie, but I don't know if that's like enough necessarily. I don't know. That's just theorizing. But either way, it did not really connect. I did actually want to read this interview that Glenn had with Maureen Dowd back in December of 1985. So this is after the movie had came out, kind of flopped. So she said, I went through a difficult couple of months after Maxie was crucified. This business is so tenuous, so elusive, and so full of stuff that isn't real that to continue in it, you have to have a very strong sense of your own worth. when criticism comes to the degree that it came in Maxie, it hits you where you are most vulnerable, which is at that core, that engine that keeps you going, that keeps you getting up again and again and again. And it took me a while to regroup, but I have, and I feel now that if they've trashed me once, they can trash me again, and it doesn't matter.
Oh, wow. I never realized what a
Yeah.
emotional upheaval that was in her career.
I
Because
know.
I guess it is sort of taking a chance. Now, excuse me, because what did she do next?
Well, that same year she had Jagged Edge.
Oh, okay. But obviously
Which-
that would have been filmed before this came out, right?
Yeah. But then, I mean, her next film after this is it's Fatal Attraction. So,
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's
So,
that's a career maker. Yeah. Oh, fascinating.
Very much so.
Yeah.
yeah.
I wonder.
So she
I mean,
really
obviously,
took it to heart, you know.
it's interesting.
Because, I mean, she had been on such a roll.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Keep going.
From
Keep going.
like,
I kind of forgot where I was going.
Garp,
Yeah.
The Big Chill, The Natural. She got an Emmy nomination for Something About Amelia. She got Oscar nominations for all those films. She won a Tony for The Real Thing, all in the early 80s. And this kind of felt like a little bit of a humbling moment, perhaps, of being like, okay, I'm not always going to be at that level of getting that praise all the time necessarily. So she had to kind of figure things out a little bit more from here.
So if you think about it, I mean, I'm sure you'll talk about this more on your actual Fatal Attraction episode. I'm sure that if it wasn't for this movie, maybe we don't have her performance in Fatal Attraction, because if she felt that way, I would assume that then she wanted to be very strategic about her next choice.
Yes.
Which is obviously like the
so, too.
total opposite of that film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything of, again, like separating the politics of that film.
Yeah.
It's beautifully shot. It's wonderfully
Beautifully
edited.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh,
The
yeah.
story makes sense, right? It all flows.
Yep. They did change the ending famously.
Oh, that's right. They did. Yes. But it's like,
But-
it's like, you can still go, oh, wow. Like, this is much better made film than Maxie, for sure. And yeah, it's a film of its time. But you kind of see why the film was unfortunately sort of forgotten. And then, I find this fascinating now, because I really think that if it wasn't for this film is pivotal in her career, whether we know it or not, because, obviously we don't know, but like, and I'm sure you'll find this out, but like hands down, it has to be the reason that she did that film next and then changed her life. That's
pretty fascinating.
That's the Glenn Close that we know, right? That's the Glenn Close that we know.
Know and love.
Yeah.
But I did want to also mention that for Maxie, for that award season, I don't think Orion, the producer, the production company behind this, really campaigned it. It wasn't a hit. It didn't get good reviews, but they also had much higher profile contenders that year, like The Purple Rose of Cairo, which this kind of plays in similar territory of, but got much better reviews.
Yeah.
But I did want to note, of course, that Glenn did get a few nominations that year. She was nominated for a Saturn Award, so because it's fantasy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but she was also nominated at the Golden Globes for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical.
Oh.
And fun trivia fact for the audience, speaking of pivotal for her career, this was her first feature film that Glenn Close was nominated for a Golden Globe for, if you can believe it.
Oh, geez.
Yes.
Well, the Golden Globes.
She had been nominated for Something About Amelia at the TV movie the year before,
Okay.
but her theatrical film.
Oh, I see.
This is the
Okay.
first.
I mean-
not Garp, not The Big Chill,
Not
not The
Garp.
Natural, which is so wild. Yeah.
It's interesting, the Globes, obviously it's so different now, but
Yeah.
when I was
That's
growing
an
up,
understatement.
yeah, I know, right? When I was growing up, that comedy and musical category was always sort of a really great place for them to, pay tribute to a great comedic performance. But also there were people that they just really liked. And a lot of it also was, we like the popular kids, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah,
this
bringing them
person's
to the
getting a
party.
lot of buzz,
Yeah.
so we're gonna again. But I think she was great in the part, so she deserves it, right? Many
Yeah,
people have gotten Golden
absolutely.
Globe nominations for terrible films, even Oscars for terrible films.
Yeah.
But that's nice. I hope that
yeah.
I hope that she was able to take that, right, because it sounds like
Yeah.
this was
exactly.
a kind of experience that, whether she really loved doing it, may have, because of the reaction to it maybe left a bad taste in her mouth. Oh, I remember what I wanted to say, but something about you were saying about Steve Martin has said, based on the trajectory of and the popularity of Three Amigos, he believes that it takes 10 years for you to actually know if a film is a hit. Now, obviously, that's not what's happening here, right? But also, like, I met Madeline Kahn when I was in my early 20s, and I didn't know that Clue was a bomb because I was young. And when I told her how much I loved Clue, she looked at me so strangely. And I didn't understand. I thought that I was just being, like, embarrassing or, like, overly, like, you know, flowery, like, you know. And so when a 20-year-old is like, I love you, and is, like, just vomiting like all the films that you like at them, even if this was through someone I knew, so like she was doing a favor for her boss, but like I'm sure it gets a little like, whoa. So I just thought that that's what I was doing. I was being too, like, you know, I had never met someone that I idolized before, but it was, I realize now it was because to her it was a flop and she had no idea. And the same thing happened with, you know, Steve Martin, where they were like, why do you want to talk about Three Amigos? And that did better than Maxie. That did way better than Maxie. But you know, you kind of hope that that maybe that still gave her a warm feeling past everything. Because, you know,
I think so.
They say that memories can get clouded, right? You can have a great time doing something, but then if the aftermath is bad, maybe then you look on it, you know, with a sadness or something. Because whether the movie is great or not, it meant something to me growing up, and I hope that it would not be something that she feels bad about or feels angry or something. I don't know. Not maybe angry is not the word, but like I guess a bitter taste about it. I hope that maybe was softened the blow.
Yeah, I would think so. I did want to just briefly mention the other nominees from that category that year, because again, another fascinating snapshot of the 80s. So there was Rosanna Arquette for Desperately Seeking Susan, Mia Farrow in The Purple Rose of Cairo, Sally Field in Murphy's Romance, and the winner was Kathleen Turner in Prizzi's Honor. Pretty solid lineup.
That makes sense.
Also, zero overlap with the Oscars. Fun fact. But yeah, what do you think?
Well, I saw Prizzi's Honor as a teen. I enjoyed it. I was always loved Turner as a child because I was really into those romance movies, Jewel of the Nile and Romancing the Stone. I thought those were great.
Yes.
So that's an interesting category. Desperately Seeking Susan is a wonderful film. Wonderful film, I think. I mean, I haven't seen it for a while, but I hope it holds up. Okay, so Murphy's Romance was another of those movies like Maxie I watched a lot. I cannot tell you really what it was about, except it was a love triangle, and I think one of the people... I was like, it was an older actor. I had his name, and then it went out of my head. So I watched a lot of Sally Field movies growing up as well.
Oh, yes.
So this, I think it's a good category. Like, as someone who comes from comedy, it's so rare that comedy gets any sort of recognition in kind of, quote unquote, the main categories. So I'm always absolutely delighted when we can have a comedy category because it's so rare. So those, I think those all sound really great, but it makes sense. I mean, Prizzi's Honor kind of, is it a comedy? I mean, it's comedic, you know, that feels like a bit of a, so it makes sense that she won. And obviously that film got, you know, other Oscar nominations and wins. It's got great performances in it. So that all makes sense.
Yeah. So obviously Maxie did not get any Oscar nominations. Would you have nominated anything from Maxie? No,
but
not even the costumes.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, Anne Roth to the sky. I mean, just everything.
She should just get a slot every year, like
every
Diane
year.
Warren gets.
Exactly.
An
you know,
original song.
she's our Edith Head. I mean, in all realistic.
She really actually is. Yeah. No joke.
But not that I think she deserved it, but I could see a sympathy vote because she had passed away.
For Ruth.
Yeah. I mean, she already had an Oscar, so it's not like, but like, maybe I could see that. But no, nothing. I mean, I love the score, but you have to remember, as I said, like all the scores kind of sounded like that back then.
Yes.
It's sort of, I can't explain it, right?
Very
What
true.
was it? It was kind of like I don't know. It's just so specific to the 80s. I can't describe it.
Yes, it's kind of like this very jaunty feeling. That's like you can kind of move to it, but it's also not like a dance necessarily. Just like I don't know. Yeah, you're right. It's hard to explain.
Yeah.
But Unless we have anything else, I think we can get to our final segment here,
Okay.
where we will rate Glenn's performance on a very specific scale. So thinking about her performances, I suppose you could say, and where this sits in her career, would you say that her performance, that she is ready for her close-up, which is to say one of her best top performances, perhaps even Oscar-worthy? Is it low Glennergy, which is like not really one of your favorites, not an essential Glenn watch, or is it somewhere in the middle, which is close but no cigar?
I really thought about this because you told me ahead of time. And I
Okay.
feel like it's close but no cigar. Because I feel like it is such a delightful performance. She gets to play two characters. And I think that if you love actresses and acting and Glenn, this is a fun watch. It's not her fault that she's in a movie that maybe doesn't elevate to the performances. But I know some people can't do that. I have no problem. I can watch tons of movies and go, didn't love it, but I love this aspect to it. You know, you can see a comedy and laugh your head off and at the end go, that was bad. I remember one particular movie, my friends and I afterwards, we went, okay, we could not stop laughing. Why did we hate it? Like, because it was a bad movie, but the people in it were really funny. Like, it was like all these amazing comedic people and they were great, but we didn't like the film. But we laughed our heads off because they were great. So, yeah, I want to recommend it, but I sort of worry, like you said, like when you watch a movie that you love, not that I love this movie anymore, with someone and then they're disappointed and you're like, I'm so sorry that I recommended this to you. Like, I worry about that. But obviously people who are listening to this podcast love Glenn. So yeah, watch it. Maybe fast forward the other stuff. Also, Ruth Gordon. I wish more people knew about Ruth Gordon. Well, I guess maybe her Oscar win does get Criterion a lot. But I just adore that woman so much. I
will also agree with you and say close but no cigar. I think it's a really, really fun, very committed performance as Maxie. Her performance as Jan obviously doesn't stand out as much necessarily compared to Maxie, but you know, she nails some of the more emotional stuff that's kind of swirling inside of her, even if the script doesn't always give her what's needed in that respect. But yeah, and I think she nails the emotional drama of the ending, even if it's kind of hokey and silly. That she just commits so well to it that I respect the performance, and I hope that all these years later she can look back on it with some perspective and feel that she did do good work here.
Yeah.
And separate from the swirl of negativity that was happening at the time.
There's so much in film that, as an actor particularly, you have no control over.
Right, exactly.
You don't know what the finished product's going to be. You just bring your best. And she brought her best, as she always does.
Yeah.
Where's her Oscar? Which I'm sure is going to be the thematic through line of this series. Where is it?
Sure will be. Where is it? Oh, God, yes. And we're coming up on some good opportunities that could have happened for her, but then they just found other people. But alas, Lauren, thank you so much. I feel like we learned so much about you on this episode. Like, you really...
Hopefully it was good.
No, it was great. No, I like so much about, you know, your career and your experiences. So I personally loved it. So thank you.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. If you ever need anyone to talk about anything else, damages perhaps, but anything like
damages,
it's always a joy. You know so much about film and about Glenn and about the Oscars, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people find more of you on the internet? What are you doing lately? I know you're always keeping busy.
Yeah, I am on the socials at Lauren Milberger, 1 L and an E. My website, my name, laurenmilberger.com. I guess my most recent thing is I am on the first episode of the HBO CNN documentary series, is sort of a talking head on Murphy Brown called TV on the Edge, which is about the whole Dan Quayle thing and how it affected the news. And, you know, knowing a lot about Murphy Brown and talking about it a lot, it's a really fascinating documentary because it's the first one that really kind of goes from the news point of view into entertainment as opposed to the other way around. And so it's streaming on... I want to say HBO Max, but what are we calling it now? HBO?
That is what it is.
It's on
back
HBO.
To HBO Max.
It's streaming.
Yes.
So that's the most recent thing. And I have a book that I have an essay in on the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which you can find on my website. And I wrote an essay on Lenny Bruce.
Very cool. All right. Yes, go follow Lauren. Thank you all so much for listening. You could find me at Kevin_Jacobsen on Twitter and Instagram, just Kevin Jacobsen, no underscore on Blue Sky. You can also listen to my Oscar-themed podcast, And the Runner-Up Is, for coverage of every single Best Actress race, including 1992 with Lauren here. That's And the Runner-Up Is on all podcast platforms. And to keep up with the world according to Glenn on social, follow The Glenn Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Rate, review, and follow The World According to Glenn on all podcast platforms. And with that, I will bid you all adieu.